Hi, my name is Cherry Yam, and I'm from the Education University of Hong Kong. I'll be presenting to you a study about concept learning with pictures and concept maps in native versus non-native English learners. So first, I would like to introduce the educational context in Hong Kong. We are a highly bilingual city, and second language learners, L2 learners of English, forms a majority group in Hong Kong's education. So a series of studies that are large-scale and longitudinal among Hong Kong high school students have shown that late immersion in L2 English negatively affected academic self-concept and also non-language subject learning, for example, learning science or history. In the tertiary education context as well, we see that many university programs actually teach in English, which is the L2 of many students, and almost all course assessments are also in L2 English. And this has a negative effect on learning outcomes, and studies have reported that L2 English reading and writing are among the top difficulties in university adjustment among Hong Kong students. Next, I would like to talk about multimodal presentation. This is a very broad concept that could include oral versus written inputs. For example, you are listening to a presentation now, you hear my speech and also look at the slide, which has words, that's textual input. There's also visual information that is presented in different ways. For example, bullet points on a PowerPoint slide, or you could insert videos for dynamic display. So there are many different ways of presenting information multimodally. So I just mentioned slide support for presentations, but also we commonly see this in university textbooks. And this kind of learning material design is supposed to make learning more interesting and more memorable. So in the next page, we'll see an example. So this is a typical psychology textbook. And you'll see in the boxes here that pictures are inserted to illustrate the key concepts that are mentioned. And also there are different ways of presenting materials, for example, through timelines and also through these kinds of concept map designs to help students learn and recall materials. Next, I would also like to briefly go through what academic words are. And for the study, we focus on the second part here, subject-specific technical words. So these are distinct from general academic words, which are highly frequent in written text across multiple subjects. And they typically have slightly different meanings depending on the subjects in which they are used. For example, the words analyze, distribute, prevalence, these are all general academic words. In contrast, subject-specific technical words would be very frequent within that particular topic or discipline, but they are much less frequent outside of that area, and it represents specialized knowledge or concepts. For example, incision could appear in medicine or botany, whereas polynomial is a technical word in mathematics. Now, why do we care about technical words learning? We found that we know from research that academic language abilities are important predictors of learning outcomes. And this is from early stages of education in primary and middle school students all the way to tertiary education. And in the context of the bilingual world, we see that technical word knowledge and general academic word knowledge and L2 vocabulary word knowledge can be distinct. So L2 vocabulary, general capacity or ability to use the second language accounted for a large amount of variance in the GPA, in the academic outcome, whereas technical words could explain additional variance. And because technical words are infrequent outside of that specific discipline, it is often conceptually unfamiliar as well. It could be very difficult to learn. So difficult to learn in L1, but even more so in the second language. Now, bringing these together, when we think about learning technical words, L2 learners, they are prone to producing certain errors. We know from this study, Gavlasova 2014, that they may produce a definition that belongs to another word that is similarly learned about that discipline. So what it shows is that semantic content may be available, but form meaning mappings are loosely connected in the learners. In the context of a model, we may think about the typical triangle model. So one possibility is that when we include multimodal learning materials, these could serve as encoding cues so that these information are more tightly remembered and recalled. However, an opposite viewpoint is that when learners are simultaneously processing lots of information, they may be overloaded cognitively. So taking the perspective of the cognitive load theory, it may be that multimodal presentation, giving learners pictures or additional information, could worsen learning so that they cannot encode all the information. We also have this additional research question about the affective factors in learning, whether learning interest or the perceived difficulty may change depending on how we present the materials, and also whether these learners are native speakers versus non-native speakers. Okay, so a brief recap. We hope that to test whether multimodal presentation could help the concept become more concrete from an abstract representation and become more structured from a loose representation. So we proposed 2 ways to do this, and we think that it could be having specific effects. For including pictures, this may increase the imageability of a specific concept, whereas including a concept map during learning could help the semantic structure. But the ultimate question, I think, is whether we see it as a help or a hindrance to the learning. So for the current study, this is an online behavioral experiment that's conducted within a US sample and a Hong Kong sample. These are all university students who are taking English programs. And the first independent variable is, of course, the group where they are from. And the language background would be the key difference here, whether they're native or non-native English learners. They participated through an online platform, Qualtrics, and the recruitment was done through Prolific or on university campuses. And the other independent variable is the presentation mode, whether it is in plain text, with pictures, with concept maps, or with both. So these are factorial manipulations of 12 technical words in English. The learning was done through a passage. We'll see an example very soon. But also to mention the dependent variables of the study. First, for the cognitive DV, we measure the immediate meaning recognition performance, and also the same test, but with a 1-week delay. And for affective dependent variables, we measure self-ratings on situational interest and perceived difficulty of learning the concept. And because learning new words is very dependent on existing language abilities and levels, we include 2 covariates, the English vocabulary test by using Lextail, and also an English spelling test. We have a few research hypotheses. First is that L1 should be more effective than L2 in technical word learning, so it should be shown in a group effect. Secondly, we would expect that multimodal presentations to be more effective than plain text in technical word learning if we believe in these multimodal presentations being beneficial. And because they should target different aspects of memory and learning, we predicted that they may have additive benefits. And thirdly, we believe that the L2 group may see greater changes in their affective variables in learning because they may not interact with the concept directly through text, but instead may rely on multimodal materials to help with the lower language processing efficiency. Okay, so as promised, this is an example of one of the concepts used in the study. And you see that this is a series of sentences about achondrites. These are stony meteorites. We chose infrequent words in the English language that represents a specialized concept. Okay, I won't read through it, but we also have pictures that would match with this concept. And also here is a concept map that represent this concept as well, based on the passage that describe the same concept. And this slide shows a summary of the participant backgrounds. The L1 group from the US and the L2 group from the UK, you'll see the sample sizes are quite similar, around 230 to 40. The mean age is 20 to 21, a university student sample. And here I want to highlight the prior knowledge about the concepts, because we did not create new concepts, but these are existing in certain fields. Participants may already have some familiarity with the concepts if they had interest in these fields. So for the L1 group, we see that actually 18 to 76 participants reported that they knew one of the 12 concepts. The most known word from our stimuli list is parallax, whereas the least known is this one, chiaroscuro. And for participants who reported word knowledge, they said that they are maybe 6.5 out of 9 points familiar with this concept. Whereas if it's in L2, you can see the overall trend, less participants knew the concepts, and the mean was only 13 participants across the 12 concepts. And the rated familiarity were also lower, even though they all of them reported some knowledge. This is just for information, just to keep in mind when we interpret the results. And here comes the descriptive statistics of the outcomes and the covariates. Okay, so the first two, English vocab and English spelling, not surprisingly, the native English group shows better performance. And these are statistically significant differences. And in terms of domain familiarity, for example, in achondrites is about astronomy. We asked participants whether they are generally familiar with astronomy versus the specific concept. And again, we see that native English participants appear to have more, or they self-rate more familiarity with these. And finally, of course, the more important outcome is the learning performance, which is the immediate recognition, 73 versus 60%, and the delayed recognition task, 70 versus 59%. So we see that across the 1 week, the difference is not very big, only a 1 to 3% on average, but the group difference is certainly there. And this is the raw data just showing you difference between the groups and also by conditions. And it should be very obvious that actually the multimodal presentation conditions had very little visual effect. So we can see that all 4 conditions look like they're on the same line. This is not an error. It really is like that. And when we run the statistical model in a generalized linear mixed effects model, we see that actually the covariates, so the English vocabulary and the English spelling tasks, they were the strongest predictors of learning performance. And once we control for these two, the group effect was not significant. And we also see that the multimodal condition manipulation was not significant in the immediate test. And then next, we can look at the follow-up task. So after 1 week, the multimodal condition still doesn't look like it's producing much of an effect. The comparison lines here are very flat. And again, we see that the English skills, vocab and spelling are significant predictors. And somewhat surprisingly, picture condition was also a significant predictor of learning success. However, once these are, the covariates are considered, the group effect again is not significant. Next, we can look at the affective ratings. So these were done immediately following the learning and the testing, not after this, immediate after learning on a 1 to 9 Likert type scale. And on the left here, this is the average interest participants' view towards the concept. And over on the right is the difficulty. And we see the blue line here is the Hong Kong group, the L2 English group, is a significant difference between, this is the picture condition. If the stimuli is presented with a picture, Hong Kong second language participants, they rated the interest as higher. Whereas for the L1 group, this difference was not significant. And here, for difficulty, the Hong Kong group showed a larger reduction of perceived difficulty when the pictures are shown with the concept. Again, this manipulation is a comparison between plain text and text with pictures. So the textual information that the participants are getting are the same. It is the addition of pictures that are influencing these affective ratings. Okay, so quick summary. We see 3 key results. First is that language proficiency, as measured by the vocab test and the spelling test, this was the strongest predictor of technical word learning across L1 and L2 groups. And we see that for both groups, multimodal presentations in the form of pictures and concept maps did not influence immediate technical word learning success. However, pictures enhanced delay recall, and this is across both L1 and L2 groups. And finally, this is in line with our prediction. We see that the L2 group was influenced by the presence of pictures in their affective ratings. So they indicate higher learning interest and lower perceived difficulty, only for pictures, but not for concept maps. Okay, so that was a very quick run through of the study design and the results. So I wanted to show you, this is the original plan of the whole study. So we looked at whether there's multimodal presentation versus textual representation across different language groups, and whether they may be affected by affective variables. And we looked at some behavioral changes in terms of the meaning recognition performance immediately and also after 1 week. So this is to help me tell you about the future directions. What we plan to do as well is to include a third group that would be a proximal L2. So the language distance between the L1 and L2 may be smaller. For example, English and Dutch would be a linguistically closer language. We feel that this kind of 3-way comparison may show us more about whether these technical word learning process is influenced by these affects or really the language linguistic kind of factors. We will also be collecting some data about neural changes during learning by measuring the ERP, event-related potential data in these learners. So yes, so I already talked about the future directions. Aside from what I said about the other parts of the planned study, we also plan to conduct more nuanced analysis on the affective pathways of learning, so how interest and difficulty may impact the learning outcomes and whether the domain or concept familiarity may influence these ratings is something that we'll be doing in the near future. And a third direction that we may consider in the future is whether we can compare these language groups within the same educational context. Because as we will know, schools in Hong Kong and schools in the United States or in Europe could be very different culturally in addition to linguistically. So in closing, thank you for your attention. Again, I'm Cherry Yam. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions or comments about this research study. And finally, I want to acknowledge the funding. The study was supported by the Research Grants Council in Hong Kong. This is a general research fund. Thank you very much.